Hey guys, Kripparrian here. In this video I'm going to show you how to defeat 25-man Heroic Lich King. For this encounter you're going to want to have a boss mod add-on on each raid member. You're going to need 2 priests, with at least one of them being disciplined, 2 holy pallies, 1 resto shamans, and I recommend 1 extra healer. Any will do, but a resto druid is probably best. As for tanks, you can use any of the 4 tanks. The weakest one is clearly the warrior. If you can avoid using warriors as tanks, you should. Any 2 tanks will do. You're also going to want to have a shadow priest and a hunter. As phase 1 starts, you're going to want a bloodlust. Trust me. You're also going to notice several changes. The main one is that Infest does significantly more damage, so your priests need to be prepared for it. A new ability that the Lich King gains on Heroic mode is Shadow Trap. He launches one of these black little missiles, and there's these like swirly thing on the ground that's black, and after a couple seconds a void zone spawns. Essentially you just want to get away from the void zones, and you don't have to worry about what they do. The Shamblers in phase 1 also berserk when they're sub 20%. This berserk coupled with the enrage is going to one-shot any tank through most cooldowns, so you want to have very quick dispels on the enrage. The ghouls in phase 1 are pretty much irrelevant. They're to be tanked by your main tank along with the boss, and they will be cleaved down as well as killed during the transition phase. Your goal in phase 1 is to burn down Lich King to 70% before the 3rd Shambler spawns. As the transition phase begins, your last Shambler, which is your 2nd Shambler, should be just about dead, and your main tank should be ready to pick up the first Raging Spirit that spawns. The only real difference is that the orbs that come through have a lot more HP. They will require 2 to 3 range to kill them. Just as normal, when the orbs target a player, that player deals damage to all those around him. On Heroic, this damage can be quite significant, and if the player targeted by an orb is in the melee stack, you should have them move out in order to avoid any possible deaths. If your DPS is on par, you should transition into phase 2 with only 1 Raging Spirit up. You want to start phase 2 by having a tight stack near the center of the room. This is because the first thing that's going to happen is the set of Valks is going to spawn. Just as normal mode Lich King, the Valks will always travel to the nearest side from where they pick the person up. This is why you want to be stacked in a position that is just slightly away from center and does not have a defile in between its position and the corresponding edge. The Valks on Heroic have more than 3 times the HP of those on normal, but you only have to DPS them down to half HP. When you DPS the half HP, they will drop the player they've held, and they will fly up to the center. When they're in the center of the room, they will shadow both players, and it's good if you can have your off-tank taunt them with spare taunts that he's not using for Soul Reaper. If you use a boss add-on, such as DXC, your Valks will be marked with different marks. In our case, the Valks are marked triangle, circle, and diamond. You want DPS assigned to each one of them, and you want DPS that can do damage very evenly to 3 targets to be assigned to all of them. When it comes to controlling the Valks, you want to have very specific people assigned to each Valk to snare and stun the Valk. Each person that has a job like this needs to have a backup if he should be picked up by the Valk. If you choose your main tank or your off tank to have one of the snaring or stunning duties, you will not need a backup because they cannot be picked up by the Valks. Should any of your healing priests be picked up by the Valks, you will have a problem with the next Infest. The best way to combat this is to have off-spec heals as well as your Shadow Priest cast Hymn. Defile works the same way it does on normal mode. However, because on Heroic mode you have to be stacked when the Valks come out, sometimes Defile will be very challenging because you have to get the person with Defile separated from everyone else who is in the same position when it is about to be cast. Players targeted with Defile have 2 seconds to move away from the raid. Using any popular boss mod, they will be marked with Skull, and the rest of the raid members will have the same 2 seconds to attempt to move away from that particular player. The most important thing is the person with Defile needs to move in a very definitive direction as soon as he possibly can, so the rest of the raid can adjust for his position. That player can move in any direction he wants except in the path of the Valks. If he moves in the path of the Valks, you will almost certainly wipe, because either you will not have your melee on the Valks or you will wipe instantly to the growth of the Defile, which you can see here in one of our failed attempts. As you approach 40%, you need to plan your transition. You do not want to have Valks up when you transition because the players on the Valks will almost certainly die from the winter. The best way to transition is After killing a wave of Valk, consider how much time you have before the next wave. With standard DPS on Lich King, if you have gotten to this point, you should be able to do 1% every 4 to 5 seconds. Considering that fact, your raid leader should then make the call to push Lich King or do slow DPS and wait for the next wave of Valks that will be killed. As the second transition phase is about to begin, you want to have your raid on the edge so they can jump on the ice just as it spawns to avoid any damage they would have taken otherwise. The second transition phase is the same as the first transition phase, except that you get the one extra Raging Spirit at the end. Your goal by the end of this transition phase is to have 2 out of the 4 dead, and the third one at extremely low life that you could kill him seconds after you go into the third phase. As the third phase begins, you will have about 10 uneventful seconds of DPSing down the remaining Raging Spirits until he sucks you in with his Group Harvest Soul ability. At this point, your raid has been teleported to what I refer to as the down phase. During the down phase, your job is to stay alive for 40 seconds. There are 2 things that are going to try to kill your raid members. Number 1 are these bombs that fall from the sky. They mostly spawn on players, but not always. Sometimes they are random. They take a couple seconds to hit the ground, and when they hit the ground, they do damage in a radius that is usually enough to kill a player. The second thing that will kill you are these spirits, which resemble Vile Spirits from the normal mode encounter of Lich King. They explode when they reach a player, but they are very easily killed in the down phase. They only have a couple thousand HP, and your ranged DPS should be constantly tabbing and using instant abilities. With enough players helping out, these spirits do not pose much of a threat to the raid. The first thing you do when your raid is sent to the down phase is mark your most capable player and have every member in the raid stack on that player. That player should then lead the raid continuously into positions that do not have any bombs on them. If any member dies during this down phase, you will enrage the Lich King upstairs, and you most likely will wipe because of it. Every down phase is absolutely identical, and with enough practice, your stack target should be able to continuously find good areas for your raid to move in. So your raid has survived the 40 seconds of the down phase, and you're now sent into the up phase. The first up phase is going to be different than all the other ones. The primary focus for your raid during the first up phase is to kill any remaining Raging Spirits. When you're doing this off to one side of the platform, you want your tank to tank Lich King on the exact opposite side of the platform with healers there. Once Lich King casts Vile Spirits, the main tank should move Lich King to where the raid is. While he is doing so, a hunter who is marked should drop a frost trap in between the Lich King and the raid. The Lich King should run through it to activate it. A few seconds later, the Vile Spirits should be coming towards the raid. Your raid should be stacked so they're all going in the same direction. If you have killed all your Raging Spirits, your off tank should intercept these Vile Spirits with a cooldown. If you have not, you can use the dispersion from a Shadow Priest plus the bubble from perhaps a Ret or a Holy Pally to intercept these particular Vile Spirits. Soon after you have dealt with those Vile Spirits, you will see that Lich King has casted a new batch. However, this batch will not come down before Lich King casts his Harvest Soul. So your goal is to get Lich King to the center of the room as fast as you can after he has casted the second set. At that point, you will experience a down phase. Once you have completed the down phase, you're going to go into the up phase. Every up phase after this point is going to be absolutely the same. The first thing that happens when you go into an up phase is there's going to be a defile. So your raid spreads out. Your hunter, however, needs to drop a frost trap on the Lich King as fast as he can. These 2 things need to happen immediately. Once your raid has dealt with a defile, they're going to run to the edge that is opposite where the Vile Spirits from the previous up phase are. Your raid needs to stack tightly on this position because the Vile Spirits will come quite soon, and your off tank and whoever else should deal with them as fast as they can. Once all the previous Vile Spirits have been killed, you will notice that Lich King has already spawned a new set of Vile Spirits, and you need your raid to go to the opposite side as fast as they can. Once that second set of Vile Spirits has been dealt with, you want to move Lich King to the center of the room and prepare for another down phase. This kind of up phase will repeat itself again and again until Lich King will enrage. Your goal in phase 3 is to have a sense of consistency that will allow everyone in your raid to stay alive until the very end. If you meet this, you will not have any DPS problems and you will complete the encounter successfully.